just introduce you to Tarana. Dr. Tarana Husain Khan is a writer and food historian. She is the author of a critically acclaimed book on Rampur cuisine, Dekh to Dastar Khan. Kissas and Recipes from Rampur, a best-selling historical fiction, The Begum and the Dastan. She has also co-edited and contributed to an anthology of food writings, Forgotten Foods, Memories and Recipes from Muslim South Asia. Her articles have been published in prominent media outlets, anthologies, and research journals. She worked as a research fellow at the University of Sheffield on an Arts and Humanities Research Council funded project called Forgotten Food Culinary Memory and Local Heritage and Lost Agricultural Varieties in India. Tarana's journey into Rampur cuisine began with translating Persian cookbooks dating back to 19th century housed in the Raza library. As she began cooking some of the 300 plus recipes with the traditional Rampur chefs under the Forgotten Foods project, they were able to revive more than 40 recipes and present them at food festivals. So, welcome, Tarana. We are looking forward to having you at the retreat and enjoy your cooking at our festival in August.
Thank
Uh,
you so
so,
much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
so we are really, it's an honor that you've agreed to do this with us and also come for the FDC and share your some advice and knowledge with the first time writers here. So, to get started, discovering the 19th century Persian cookbooks in the Rampur's Raza library kind of changed your life and led on to the path that you're now on. So, can you tell us about the moment that sparked your interest in food and eventually writing?
So, when I was researching at the Raza Library, I was researching for my historical fiction. And basically, I wanted to know more about the culture of my city. I had come back to this city, which was my ancestral city, and it was also my husband's ancestral city. And so, as I was settling back, I wanted to know more about the culture. And there was this story. Uh, it was historical fiction which I wanted to write. So while I was just looking around, then some research scholar, like he was a librarian, and he just said that, do you know that there are Persian cookbooks in the Raza library? So I said, no, I didn't know about it. So he said, why don't you look them? I said, I don't know Persian at all. He said, oh, they are really ancient. And so I was really intrigued. And when I went to the library, he said, do you know Persian? I said, of course, I don't know. I know. I said, I don't know. So he said, why are you wanting to research? You can't read it. So what's the point? Anyway, I finally got my hands on those cookbooks. And because the script is the same, so I could understand that there were more than 300 recipes. There were more than 30 pulaus and so many mutton dishes, so many kebabs, and so many sweets that I had not heard of. We just know one kind of a pulao. We just know one kind of biryani. We just know one kind of korma, for instance, and, 4, 5 kebabs. That's also what happened to all the rest of the 50 shades of pulao that we used to have. So that was the thing that intrigued me. And so I learned Persian and with the help of a librarian. And together we sat and we actually translated all the recipes of there are about 12, 13 cookbooks. So we took one or two representative cookbooks and we started translating. But the point was how to put them into action, because they are more than dating 1816 to 1880. So the terminology has changed. The ingredients were surprisingly same, most of them, but how to make it, because they were very, very, very strangely put. You're supposed to know a lot of things. Like if 100 years from now, someone reads two whistles of the pressure cooker, they'll say, what is whistle? What is this whistling thing happening over here? So it's the same thing. The whole terminology has changed. And so it was very tough to, actually cook those dishes with the help of Khan. So I started writing about them. It was a very funny thing to write about. my trials, my the first thing we cooked was pulao Shahjahani, and so I wrote about it. And that was the beginning of my writing, food writing. Already I was writing my historical fiction, and that was the beginning, and from then it just continued to getting a project and reviving these recipes, which, and I was not a foodie. I had no interest in writing about food. I'd never read any food writing, so it was just fated, is all I can say.
I am still stuck on the fact that the level of commitment it would have taken for you to learn a whole new language to just to do
Yes.
this. So,
Yes. I love
yeah.
Persian. I love Persian, though I don't know it very well even now. I can just read recipes. That's about it. But yes, so I did
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So talking about commitment, it must have also taken a lot of commitment because how does one go about authenticating the information that has passed down orally and through generations in a family?
Yes. So, most of history is political history that we read is all political history, the reigns of people. Even food is barely written about. Women are never written about, and I was researching a gender-based historical fiction. So how do you uh, go about recreating stories about these women who have actually suffered? And this is about a woman who was trapped in the harem, and that actually happened. So you have to turn to oral history. And then oral history is passed down generations, right? And it changes with the telling. So then it becomes very difficult to corroborate it with written history and with what actually happened. Did this happen or did that happen? So you have to go to oral history is however very important. Now historians are realizing the importance of oral history, because through oral history a lot of things, especially recipes or stories about families, are transmitted down. You have to go to different sources. So for this story of this woman in the harem, I had to go to a number of family members, people who were acquaintances of this lady. And then I tried to find the story of this woman and also the written records and diaries. So the same thing with recipes. With recipes also, you have to understand, because when you look at the old cookbooks, they'll never tell you that what was the color of the dish, what was the consistency of the curry, how did the dish look, nothing at all. There are no pictures. So you have to go to the oral history and you have to understand, what did this dish taste like? When was it served? What were the etiquettes of serving and dining? All this is found in oral history. That is why you have to research oral history. You have to, of course, it's not like 100% history. Remember, it is translated down. So you have to corroborate it with written secondary sources, primary sources, with other oral histories. So it's a lot of work before you can say, okay, yes, this thing was correct.
So also, how do you decide which story or tradition or recipe should be revived and be part of our cultural history?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. So we had about 300 recipes, more than 300 recipes. So how many could we revive really? Now the question was that, when you buy a cookbook, of course you don't cook every dish in that cookbook, right? So the Nawabs were collecting these cookbooks, but they were not always cooking everything. So, what was actually cooked? So, I went back to the memoirs that were written by the women of the Nawab's family. There were two memoirs. There was another written material which you can judge as the primary source. And through these, I got to know that okay, these dishes were on the table because they described what was served on the table. So they became the number one thing that I would definitely work out. Now, then I went to the Khansamas. Now, the Khansamas came from a tradition of royal Khansamas. So they had learned, because they are unlettered. They were not writing down anything. So they also had oral history. They had learned certain recipes, and these recipes are not there in the cookbooks, So, with, trying to balance what was the practice, what was written, all of that, then we came upon these 40 recipes, or more than 40 actually, recipes that we decided to revive. So there would be all the main things that are there, the mains, of course, like you have the korma and the pulao and the kebabs, and we already know that these are very important part of the table. How were they different, or what were the different types, styles of curries that were at that time? Right? What was the way it was cooked? So deciding on it also took some time, because not everything, for instance, there was one dish called dare bahisht. Dare bahisht means gateway to heaven. It was a sweet dish. Now everybody, even the oral history says that it was cooked. People are there in Rampur who have, from the royal family, who have had this dish. There is a recipe also,
Mhm.
right? But the skill is totally lost. The recipe does describe how to cook it, but we could not. The Khansamas had no idea how to recreate it, because the
Mhm.
old Khansamas were no more, and so you could never get. And it has got just 4 or 5 ingredients, but we could not make it. So not everything was a success. Some things we could not cook, even though we wanted to.
Mhm.
So that's how this whole journey continued, deciding what to cook, how many things we were able to, etc., etc.
Okay. So, what I also found interesting, and you have touched upon this a little bit, is the intersection of gender, food, and history in your work. So, how does focusing on women's culinary voices help us understand our own history?
Yes. See, when I'm looking at the cookbooks or the princely states, what was being cooked at that time, all the Khansamas were male, and the kitchens were in the Mardana section. So it was a sort of a male dominated thing. But the women were also doing something, like they were also cooking in their zananas. What were they cooking? We do not know much about it. But I wanted to have to know the voices of these women also. So later I came upon some diaries written in the 60s where the women were noting down these recipes. And so their role in the cuisine was actually preserving it, because once the princely state in 1949, the Nawabi comes to an end, the Khansamas are disbanded, and you come to a place where recipes are getting lost. This is the
Mhm.
time when the women are, catching hold of some recipes. They are noting down, they are remembering what to cook and how to cook. They're cooking with the khansamas. So that's the voices of women that I wanted to project through, again, oral histories. Because once again, like, you don't have a lot of women, um, pe- people writing about women cooks at all at that time.
Mhm.
But we do come to know what they were cooking through, again, family histories or oral histories, and how things were preserved by these women, the traditions were preserved by these women. So their role was so important. Yes, yet we have forgotten that role. So that's what I wanted to also write about.
Okay. The other thing that I was curious about, again, you have touched upon it a little bit already, but what are the biggest challenges in reconstructing a recipe from vague memories?
Yes, yes, that was. I think it's very, very difficult. We could find recipes for a lot of things. But for instance, a very, very funny thing. There was a dish called Diwani Handia. Diwani is crazy, it's like crazy. And so my nanny used to all the time say, Kya Diwani Handia bana di hai? And we thought it was just something colloquial. But
Mhm.
actually, there was a Diwani Handia where 4 or 5 vegetables were layered with the meat, you
Okay.
know so only from the description of the people who cooked this Diwani Handia in the winters, we were able to recreate it just by the with the khansamas, of course, because they would have an idea how it would be layered or how it could be cooked. So we were able to cook it, and it turned out to be really delicious and really fun to do. You know, you could vary your own diwangi, whatever divana thing you wanted to do in that recipe.
That sounds interesting. I just like when I was trying to imagine it, I was just thinking like you mentioned, the consistency
Mm.
was one of my biggest concerns. But then I was like, this is an interesting story. Like you can have your own divangi in it.
Yes, yes. So we
So
did that.
yeah. So how do you see the role of food history contributing to broader conversations about identity, memory, and belonging within the Indian diaspora?
I am so glad that since the, let's say, the beginning of this century, people are coming, have just awoken up to the idea of food history, which was not really a separate branch in history. And the more I researched on food history and I wrote my academic papers, I realized that identity is so finely intertwined with food, because you see, whenever, especially if you look at food and migration, for instance, I was working with the Afghan women with their food. What do they, if they miss their home, they, for example, during Nowruz, they miss their home. What do? They just cook those foods of Nowruz, and then they are with their loved ones in their homeland. So food is definitely a part of identity. Food is so much a source of comfort during migration, and it is the language of love. It is the most tangible thing that you can carry with yourself. You know, you carry your recipes in your head. I'm sure you are from Kolkata. My God, such a rich food tradition. And I'm sure even if you were never taught, how to make the Ilish, you would still know it because you've had it. You would be able to reconstruct it. And that is so much a part of your identity, isn't it? So we are the food we eat. We are the people.
Yes.
Our
Yeah.
personality is based on what we like. Our taste buds, our tongues, everything is about food.
Especially Bengalis, we are all about our food.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And you can understand that even Rampuris,
So,
I think all these cultural centers have this intense feeling around food, because as things were changing,
yes.
even in Kolkata, everywhere, the political and economic changes were happening. What could you cling to
Yeah.
was food. So, yes, all these cultural
Yeah.
centers clung to their food traditions.
Yeah. So now we'll go back to the beginning because this all began because you were researching for Begum and the Dastan, which actually centers on Firoza Begum's resistance. So, what are the
Yes.
challenges of delivering feminist themes through historical narratives?
Yes, that's again a very, very interesting question. So when you are researching a story about a woman, especially a woman who has somehow suffered, you would call it a feminist theme. Did Firoza Begum know it was feminism? No, she just did what she felt was just. She felt that she needed to take revenge for, I'm just talking about Firoza Begum. There have been so many women who have stood up, who have worked to survive, you know. So the biggest challenge is when you are writing about feminist themes, the biggest challenge is to make the character very believable, you know. I never met Firoza
Mhm.
Begum. I've just heard about her, right? So, Firoza Begum, what were her thoughts? What were her feelings? For whether it is feminist writing in historical fiction or it is feminist writing in contemporary world, you have to make the character very believable. You can't deify the character. You can't make the character absolutely passive. There has to be a sympathy in the readers for this character. and they should feel the ups and downs. They should feel that, okay, this is a flawed character. Yes, she committed certain mistakes, she made the wrong choices or whatever, but you still are with the character. I think the biggest challenge is, it is not to project it as a feminist writing. The most important thing is to project it as a humane writing. What do you feel about this character, and how can this character redeem himself? How can this character actually strike a chord with you, even when, if it is moved several paces away from you? It can be a person from a village, it can be a person existing in the 19th century, very far away from your current realities, but you have to feel something for it. I think that is the biggest challenge when writing feminist writing.
Okay. So, because it all began while you were researching for the Begum and Dasta, what advice do you have for our writers when if they want to research and write a historical fiction?
Oh, yes. um, Historical fiction takes a very, very long time to research, first of all. I that was my first historical fiction. My second historical fiction is coming out this year, and that also took nearly 4 years to research and write. The same thing with the second historical fiction. It took me 4 years to actually research it and then write it down. You cannot leave a single line, because you are writing down history. You can't portray history in a wrong way. You can't say such and such person did this, you know, and then later people discover, no, this didn't happen. So you have to be very rigorous, very thorough with the historical fiction. That is my first advice. My second advice is, do read historical fiction. I love Hilary Mantel. I don't think there is anybody who has really brought uh, historical personalities to life like she has. And she is absolutely my icon. So do read a lot of historical fiction. See how those people are not people dressed in historical clothing, women wearing gararas and shararas and going around with pandans. No, they are not. They are people who thought in that way. So you have to, the advice is, when you are writing historical fiction, your thought process, when you are projecting your thought process and when you are writing those characters, should be of those times. Firoza Begum was not a feminist. She knew that wrong had been done to her. She felt betrayed, and she decided that, yes, I am going to do something about it. Right? She just did that. And that's why people remember her today.
Mhm.
But she did not feel that, okay, I'm a woman, this is a feminist movement, and women. No, she didn't feel anything like that. In fact, she accepted a lot of indignities because women were supposed to accept a lot of things. She did that. But there were
Mhm.
things that she did to make herself better, which is why she is the heroine of the book, right?
Yeah.
So that's my advice. Be very rigorous, very thorough. Read and read and read. I think reading makes a writer, definitely.
Okay. So, I was reading they to Dastar Khan before before I was traveling, and even the stories that you have put in there. Uh, I think like your audience includes both food enthusiasts and literary or historical fiction readers. So, how do you decide on your narrative or your voice to resonate across such diverse audience? Because even when I was reading, which is supposed to be a cookbook or a recipe book, the stories just pulled me in.
So I am basically a storyteller. Um, Fiction and telling stories is very innate to my character, and it is something that comes very naturally to me. But when you write non-fiction, it's like exercising a different muscle of your body. You know, it requires a different kind of writing altogether. So alternating between the two of them, yes, it is very tough. With nonfiction, you have to be very factual about things. There can be personal histories that are included in nonfiction. And as I said, I am a storyteller, so I like mixing my own personal experience and my own stories into it as well. Uh, but when you're writing fiction, you can just take off with your imagination and just write. It's like, sailing on a boat, lying on your back and just, imagining the skies and the clouds. That's historical fiction. But when it is non-fiction, it is, I feel, more serious work is, well, I won't say more serious work actually. Even with fiction, it is so taxing. Emotionally, it is very taxing because you get so involved with your characters that I had heard writers talk about it, how much they get involved with the characters, and that's true. They start actually deciding what they. It's all true. It's all very true. They decide what they want to do, and they start taking their lives in their own hands, and they are out of your hands, and you cannot control them. So that does happen. And when I write fiction, I'm totally in that world where I get up and I want to know what my characters will do today. It's like that. Even I don't know where they are going to go, what are they going to do. So it becomes a totally different journey where you are being pulled by forces which you cannot even understand where they will go. You cannot plan it. That is fiction. With nonfiction, you can be more focused. You can really plan it. It will not be so emotionally draining, but it would be satisfying at the same time. Actually, I feel it tougher to write nonfiction, even though fiction is so draining. But writing nonfiction requires a certain technique. You have to follow that technique. With fiction, it's like freewheeling. It's just going with your imagination. And it's fun. It's really fun.
I'm wondering, like when you back in the day when you first started researching and planning and writing Begum and the Dasta, did you know that this is how it's going to go? That it's going to totally the characters are going to totally take over you, and you have to be more of a you'll end up being more of a panster than a plotter.
No, I didn't. I actually took a course, and that's one should do it, really. One should know, because Americans have just said, okay, 30 days, let's write the story in 30 days, and have a sort of a grid and this and that. So I learned all of that, because I'm a very academically inclined person. I said, okay, let me learn it. I can learn it. Let's do it. But then I had to unlearn it because fiction just cannot come like that. And it's not supposed to be, okay, now there will be a climb up, there'll be a climax, there'll be an ending, there'll be, they've got it all done, they've got it all sorted out. But that's now not how things happen. So, yes, I do float away and they do take over my life. And when I started writing Begum and the Dastan, I was this new writer, didn't really care about, they had no idea people will even read my book. So I just put in everything that I wanted in a book. Everything. There was fantasy, there was romance, there was teenage romance, there was tragedy, everything. I just made a big khichdi masala out of it. So that was fun. I was just having fun till the editor said, the dastan and the fantasy is like going crazy. So I had to cut off 50,000 words of that. I can
Oh my
actually
God.
make a yes, make a whole book out of it. So yes, I did become a panster because I realized that you cannot plan plan a story. Of course, with historical fiction, the events. You know what happened. This will happen. Or with Firoza Begum, we knew what was going to happen, how did it end, etc., etc. You would know certain events at least of the story. But where you are writing of characters, you would not know what they are going to do. You have no idea. You have no idea. Okay, these two are getting closer. Are they going to have an affair? You don't even know, but they might, or they might not, you know?
Okay. I just came up with two more questions. Sorry, people. I'll get them in. One is like, is there any chance of that 50,000 words that you cut off coming out as another book?
I would love that, that fantasy is so much fun. It's like Dastan. If you've been to a Dastan session, you now have Dastan Goi session in Delhi and other places. So the whole format is like a Dastan. And
Mhm.
the rest is all my imagination, and I would love to do that. I would even love to have an audiobook, just narrating that dastan. It's so much fun. Or even translate it in Hindi or Urdu, because the fun of dastan narrative is Hindi and Urdu. That should be a
Okay.
fun project to do.
Okay. And how was it different? Because Begum and the Dasta was your first fiction experience, and now you're coming out with your second. The difference between first and second.
The first child can be a boy or a girl. You don't care. You just want a child, right? With the second one, you are looking for perfection. You are worried that will people read it? Will they find it good enough? There are so many worries on your head, and but I still manage to have fun. I mean, if you are writing with a lot of, I've seen people who are perfectionists, and thank God I am not, because you want every sentence to be perfect, every emotion to be perfect. You want to question everything. You will not get anywhere. You have to just let loose and just write a book that you want to read, that you would enjoy reading, and get up every morning and say, and that's my advice, get up every morning and think, what will happen in the book today? What interesting thing would my characters be doing? And so that will take you to the book that's really going to grip you
Okay.
and the readers.
Thank you. Yes, Anupam, I hope you heard that. So that's all for my main questions.